Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. It's our first of 2022 in our series of webinars brought to you by Boston College's Cyber and National Security programs. I'm Professor Kevin Powers. I am the founder and director of the Graduate Cybersecurity program here at Boston College. I am a professor of the practice at the Carroll School of Management and over at BC Law as well, and I've been an attorney for over 23 years now, and I'm really excited to have our guest with us today. It's John Cordo. John's a principal at Night Dragon, and typically the way we run these webinars, I go through learning objectives, and we plan to go for an hour. But we have John with us today, who really he should be home in bed resting. He feels okay, but his voice is not all there. So we're probably going to go for about a half hour today. And, that's a credit to John, who, by the way, motivated me to jump on and put my BC jacket on. We were talking earlier. I saw he was representing and, really excited to have him on board. So John, we'll kick in because, and we'll go as long as you can. So if you could just give us a bit about who you are and your background.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm a proud BC alum. And my wife, both our families went to BC and try to catch a football game once a year. And apologies in advance about my voice. I'll get warmed up as we continue over the next 30 minutes. But in terms of my background, I graduated from the Carroll School of Management, concentrating in finance, accounting, and economics. I started my career at JP Morgan. And I didn't get involved in cybersecurity until I joined Blackstone, where I performed strategic initiatives for the firm. And one of those initiatives was to invest off the balance sheet in early stage companies, primarily in cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And I was just really fortunate to be surrounded by cybersecurity founders and practitioners who could really teach me about the escalating threat environment, the increasing skills shortage, and really the high demand for these innovative technologies. And I wanted to do that full time. It was a part-time role in venture capital at Blackstone. So I actually asked Blackstone to leave and join ClearSky, which is an early stage venture fund, primarily focused on cybersecurity. And it was a great time, but ultimately I found a good niche in the later stage venture capital and growth equity. And I developed a relationship with Night Dragon, which has a growth equity platform. And we developed a relationship, invested in a company together, and ultimately found a way to work together dating back to early last year.
Excellent. Yeah. And so can you talk a bit about Night Dragon, specifically, talk about the name first. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, no, it's a great name, and I get this question a lot. Night Dragon was named after the first major known nation-state attacks. The Night Dragon attack was led by China and targeted oil, energy, and petrochemical companies. It was first reported in 2011 by McAfee, and our founder, Dave DeWalt, was CEO of McAfee at the time. And he wanted to name his investment firm Night Dragon because the Night Dragon attack is really a seminal moment in cybersecurity history based on just the attack in general, the investigation, and the overall response. But I'm happy to share a little bit more about Night Dragon, the investment platform, Kevin.
Yeah, no, and I just think the way we're going to structure this too is we'll talk a bit about venture capital. We'll define it, different roles and responsibilities involved with that. Then we'll walk through the soup to nuts. How does things go? How do you acquire? How do you target things along those lines? But I just want to make it clear to everyone on board that when we talk about trends and beyond the 2022 and beyond, we'll get that to another time. We have John. We're going to focus right on venture capital, and all this does, it works out great for me because we'll have John back on another panel and have him talking more about the trends as they go forward. So with that, John, can you just really orient our attendees here? What do we mean by venture capital? What is that?
Yeah, so I can give you the working definition. That's something that you and I have discussed about that we don't really like, but primarily it is raising capital, and investing that capital in early stage growing businesses in exchange for ownership. But in actuality, it's a relationship business. And there are three main players that are involved. It's the limited partners, the venture capitalists, and the startups. And in terms of cybersecurity in general, there was $27 billion that were invested in cybersecurity companies in 2021. And that money comes from limited partners. They are high net worth individuals or institutional investors, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, endowments, and they're ultimately looking for a targeted return. The funds that I've been a part of target a 3 to 5 times return. And they provide that money to venture capitalists, and venture capitalists take that and try to invest in innovative technologies. And venture capitalists, they can have a variety of different backgrounds. They can be longtime investors. They can also be practitioners. They can be operators, just like our founders at Night Dragon. And what venture capitalists do is they try to find companies that are very interesting, that are growing, and companies ultimately need that capital to hire, invest in R&D, sales and marketing, and G&A, and that capital that they need needs to be strategic. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that strategic capital needs to create value and growth. And when there's value and growth created, there's opportunities for future financing rounds or exit opportunities. And
now, John, when we talk about companies too, we talked about this. When you're targeting a company, like in venture capital, they're typically not going after a company that's a consulting firm. They're targeting a technology in the cyber and data privacy space. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it does depend. But ultimately, they're looking at innovative technologies. Mm-hmm. That we invest in, primarily software businesses that are recurring in nature. We do invest in opportunities that are software with a service as well. But we're ultimately just looking for disruptive technologies that can really address those cyber threats, that can really narrow that skills gap. And really, we want to really send that innovative technology across the globe.
Yeah, and when you're looking and you're targeting, you talked about, when we discussed this earlier on, you talked about the 3 T's. Can you talk further about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So across the 3 different companies that I was part of, we focused on the 3 T's, which stand for team, TAM, and technology. Team, we like to invest in founders that have done this before, that have grown and scaled companies and had great exits. TAM stands for total addressable market. So we like to invest in large, sizable, and growing markets. The cybersecurity market in total is a $150 billion market. It's growing at 12%. There are massive submarkets within cybersecurity. And then we are looking for differentiated technologies. We are in the market every day talking to practitioners and advisors and channel partners that can really confirm and validate that this technology is different than technology that was developed years before that.
All right, so where I want to go now too is let's get to how this thing all works, okay? You gave us a nice clear definition. You gave us some of the roles and responsibilities. Let's talk about, like, how does a VC source deals, selection, structure investments, talk about the varying stages. So if you could, like, when you're at Night Dragon, or we'll just use a fictional VC if we don't want to get into too many details of proprietary information. When you start looking out at the landscape, how does this work? Because there's always this fiction. Everyone thinks of, like, hey, venture capital, I have this great idea I'm going to get invested in, and we're going to make all sorts of money and we're done. Can you explain how it really works, especially all the research and analysis that starts at the beginning?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. Maybe I just address your question on sourcing deals and then talk about the due diligence process.
Sure.
And carry you through the investment process total. So we're involved in, security, we're a cybersecurity, safety, security, and privacy focused fund. And we're immersed in those markets every day. We have decades of operating and investor experience. And what we try to do is talk to as many people as possible to really follow the trends and find very interesting companies. So like I said, we're talking to our channel partners and advisors on what's different. And we have this proprietary network that introduces interesting companies on a daily basis. We're also very proactive. We do a lot of research and perform due diligence on different sectors and different spaces. And if we find an interesting company, we're aggressive and we reach out to them and want to have conversations. We want to share the Night Dragon platform and the brand and how we can achieve go-to-market leverage, and really just have a conversation to see if there is a mutual fit.
And when you talk about the mutual fit, and I was kind of like, hey, it's all about the technology, but it really isn't all about the technology. It's really about the people as well. So when you're looking at a company, you're looking at their leadership, right? You know, their C-suite, the CEO, and you want to make sure it's a good fit of, hey, they have a great project, but do they have what it takes to be, you know, a partner with you and your venture capital firm? Because you need those relationships to really build that company out. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have to be very dynamic, right? It's the founders that I work with, they develop a product and they have an idea, and then they have to understand the market and how they're going to be positioned in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to understand how they can go to market
Mm-hmm.
and get their first customer. And then how do they accelerate that growth and achieve scale? So we're really looking at founders, management teams that are very experienced, that has all those tools and all those experiences.
Yeah, and part of that too is, you know, you want to work with them. You know, it's like, you know, the whole idea of, you know, oh, the VC's coming in, we're buying you. It's really going to be a relationship, right? You're going to work together to build that company. That's the whole idea of the Night Dragon platform, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm happy to share a little bit more about the Night Dragon platform and about how we provide some value.
Yeah.
Why not go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
So Night Dragon in general, we have a 750 million growth equity fund. That's our core platform. We're led by operating investors who have great experience leading IT and security companies. They work together at FireEye and also have experience at leading McAfee, Documentum, EMC, Avast, Siebel Systems. We're a group of 45 employees and advisors, and we have over 40 strategic relationships. And our core platform, Kevin, is across go-to-market scaling, government services, talent, and events. And we invest in later stage companies that can really capitalize on that. On the go-to-market side, we have deep relationships with the main channel partners and distributors. Some public ones are Optiv, which is the largest reseller in North America in cybersecurity. We also have relationships with Ingram Micro in North America, Exclusive Networks in Europe, Magnica in Japan, Starlink in the Middle East. And what we really try to do is work with those portfolio companies and bring them into our network, so they can really develop and grow.
Excellent. So, you know, we talked about like, okay, you identify, you know, a company, and it's not just that you find one. There could be 30 companies out there you're looking at, and then you make a determination like, hey, this is the one we really want to engage with. After you speak to the folks, you get an idea that could be a good fit. Let's talk about what the due diligence is. You know, what's that?
Yeah. Well, due diligence is really understanding a company and making the decision if you want to proceed.
And there's two due diligence, right? There's the due diligence you're doing at the outset when you're investigating and you're researching the companies. And then there's the due diligence, you know, you have a term sheet now, you decided like, hey, I think we want
Yep.
to acquire this company. So let's talk about the due diligence of now you have the term sheet and you're moving forward.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. There's a lot of work that goes into that, Kevin. But when you have a term sheet in hand, you really look for to execute all your business diligence items, conduct reference calls, perform that investment committee memo. That memo really describes all the work that you did leading up to an investment decision. Those areas include understanding a market, competition, technology, the product roadmap, sales, marketing, pipeline, financial analysis, exit opportunities. We develop an investment thesis right away during that process. We try to identify risks as soon as we can. We assess those risks. We talk to a lot of different practitioners and advisors to get their perspective to see if we're on the right track. And ultimately that leads to a decision to get a term sheet or to go to investment committee and fund an investment. And all that work up front that a venture capitalist does really helps with the next stage, which is leading to creating value for those portfolio companies.
Right. There's a lot of lawyers involved. I know that.
Yeah. And lawyers they're great, and I've learned so much from them.
Right. So, all right. So let's talk about, because I don't want to keep you on we have limited time here, and limited voice time, I should say. And you're doing great. You sound great. So I'm like pumped.
Yeah, let's keep going.
We're going to keep going until you can't talk. That's the plan.
Sorry again.
No. All right. So let's talk about like after investment. Okay. So now we've had the due diligence, you get here, what type of value does the VC really provide, to the company? You infuse this money. What else happens? It's not that you just give money, right? And then, hey, go off and do what you need to do. Talk about what the VC does, when working with the company.
Yeah, I think that varies by the venture capitalist. Like I said, they have different backgrounds and experiences and networks that they can really share. But it really is, from our perspective, the go-to-market, the talent, the events, and the government services, if that is applicable. From my perspective, I like to work closely on the go-to-market strategy, product expansion, and financial operations. I can share an example from one of our portfolio companies if that's really helpful. One of the companies that
that'd be great. Hey, John, we actually have a question here. Someone popped right in, and I have it right here. It says, "Hi, John Quiddo, Dave Hasbrook here. Thanks so much for presenting. You are clearly extremely knowledgeable of the cybersecurity and VC space. We'd love to hear your favorite BC sports moment." Wait a minute. That seems to be a bit off topic. Mine's Doug Flutie. I don't know what yours is, John. Sorry.
Yeah, let's stick to cyber.
We'll stick to cyber here.
Yeah.
No, excellent. I couldn't see the question that clearly, but it was a sports one. So yeah, let's talk about you talked about a company, Human.
Yeah, so Human Security, it is a bot protection cybersecurity company, very, very sophisticated in what they do. They validate 15 trillion transactions a week to determine if it's a bot or not a bot. And they have this incredible platform on the advertising technology integrity side, and they wanted to expand into cybersecurity. So as an investor, I worked with my team, introduced them to tech experts and practitioners that were very knowledgeable in the space and their use cases, and really helped with the product development and the positioning in the market. And as that company continued to expand and grow, helped with hiring. They recently hired a chief product officer, chief gravity officer, which is the head of sales, and chief financial officer. And what I've done is work really closely with the CEO and CFO to really help them with their debt financing, their budgeting, and their recently announced equity financing. They raised $100 million from the Westcap Group. And we continue to just be great partners. We are introducing them to our different channel partners so they can really accelerate growth at scale. We're making the right introductions at the government level, which is very hard to navigate, as you know, Kevin. And we'll just continue to amplify the brand through events, both externally and internally.
No, really, that was a great walkthrough, John. And when we think of the VC, I'm just saying the public perception, it's a lot of, hey, the VC's coming in, they just want to make a lot of money and then, churn and burn. And that's really not the case in many ways. Can you talk about what, ultimately, what's the goal of the VC here? When they come in, they identify a company, they purchase, they acquire it, what's their long-term goals?
Yeah. Well, we ultimately just want a positive outcome for everyone involved. I mentioned earlier that there's those three different players, the limited partners, the venture capitalists, and the startups. And obviously we want to provide that 3 to 5 times return. But what's really important for me and what gets me really excited is just the outcome for the startup, for the founders and for the employees. They spend a lot of their days and sometimes their whole lives building these innovative technologies, and we really want to find the right homes for them, and we want to really provide them a platform that it can really get spread to the masses and make a difference.
Yeah, okay. And can you talk a bit about too, is someone had a question here, is there any issues like, as a venture capital firm, like, is there any roadblocks that the government put in place that make your job more difficult?
I don't think so. That might make it a little bit easier. I mean, they're 20% of the security market, right? Our founder, Dave, says if you win the government, you win the market. It's difficult to navigate. And we have a head of government services that can really help our portfolio companies navigate and really identify areas that our portfolio companies can really help the government at the federal and the local level. But it's challenging, it's not easy, and not many platforms can do that. And luckily I've seen that during my time.
Okay. And can you talk a bit about too, I'm the CEO, I have my own software company. I just came up with this great idea at Boston College. I think it's really great for the data privacy space. We're making this up now. How do I get to you, John, other than like just reaching out on LinkedIn or saying like, hey, check out my product? Are there ways that entrepreneurs, small companies who have great technologies, how do they get recognized?
Yeah, so we're more later stage, but what I tell anyone who wants to start a company early on is have an idea and execute on that idea. Talk to as many people as possible, really understand your market and what you're trying to solve, and ask as many questions as possible, learn what you can, and people surprisingly will want to help you make that idea a reality. And just keep on pounding the table and evolving. And I think that's really the way to get in, because like I said earlier, it's a relationship business. And people are well connected, and it's just having an idea and being vocal about that and using your network and growing your network to find the right resources.
Okay, and we have one question here, and I think this must be from a student. What's the coolest thing about working for a VC?
Oh man, I think it really is the people, and it's the founders, right? They're very mission focused. They're very passionate about cybersecurity. I've been lucky enough to travel across the world in Israel and across the United States to really learn about their ideas and learn about their passions and how they can solve these critical issues.
Hey, and we have another question in there, and I know we talked about Human. Is there another company that Night Dragons acquired that's really going gangbusters out there that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I can, and I will. And we invest in companies, Kevin. We don't necessarily acquire them, right? We put capital in, and they're mostly minority stakes, and it's a combination of other investors. One company that is just very interesting and very topical, just given trends, is a company called Interos. What Interos does is they leverage over 100,000 data sources, and they use AI and ML to map supply chain relationships. And they monitor global events and indicate what the impact is to the supply chain. So one of the trends in how cybersecurity has evolved is that security is really at the forefront of every process. And given what happened with COVID over the last few years, supply chain analytics is just very important.
So that's on the analytics front on where things are going, how they're coming, but also on the security side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to map your underlying relationships, and that's inherently making it more secure.
Yeah, another piece in that, this is me asking a question. We talked about, the acquisition, and I like how you brought up, VCs don't just acquire, they invest, and they have different type of stakes. Can you talk about, when you look at different companies, what's that like coming in as a minority stakeholder, and how do you proceed, if you were thinking of taking over the company?
Yeah. So, I mean, just the general life cycle of venture capital, you have different rounds that you invest in, and you have at different valuations. The typical path is a minority stake where there is a lead venture capitalist, followed by insiders or other venture capitalists that want to join. Typically, the rounds that we're seeing are around 20% ownership of that round. And they raise subsequent rounds, and you get subsequently diluted as well. The acquisitions and the buyouts, those are for the more private equity firms. I worked at a private equity firm, but my main job was to work for their venture capital portfolio. So we were investing up to $5 million in early stage companies.
Okay.
And that was a $500 billion alternative asset manager at the time. And they use a lot of leverage to help acquire a majority stake. Meanwhile, in venture capital, it's more equity, even though there is some debt to really support the business.
Excellent. And this is for our attendees too, because I have a hunch that many people who are on board are interested in, getting involved with venture capital, whether it's, in a position like yours or advising with venture capital when they're looking at different industries or different types of products and things along those lines. So can you just talk a bit about, in the cyberspace, you're bringing teams in, who are the type of advisors, without saying names, but like the folks you look at when you're looking at a certain type of technology or company? Who do you bring in, and how do you identify those folks?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of different relationships, and it is a vetted process. And it's different, right? We have Fortune 500 CISOs who have 20, 30 years of experience. We look at just executives, CEOs, chief revenue officers, CTOs, a lot of thought leaders, former founders as well, that really can provide their experiences and help companies grow. And then we do work with the channel partners. That's how we believe that you can win the market and achieve scale.
Oh, that's great, John. And I like how you bring it out, because you're really talking, it's personal relationships, ultimately, because I think, how did I get connected to you? I did a webinar with Karen Kokoda, who's with Cybersecurity, right? Who was with FireEye, and you work with her, and then we got connected and we had the BC connection. But it's always that network that runs deep, and that venture capital is more than just, hey, we're targeting, it's working that network. So what companies, hey, what's the hot item and how we build it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So I'm going to go a couple of more minutes. We're at the hop.
Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, I think my voice is fine. But ultimately defer to you, Kevin.
No, your voice is fine. I'm just worried about, I don't want you to, burn out on us. I want to make sure you're fine.
I'm great, Kevin. Let's
All
continue.
right, well, perfect, because then I'm just going to move right on. So where do you see things going in the next year and actually the next few years? Because when I talk about like, it's funny, we talked about this when we said like, hey, what's the trends in 2022 and beyond? Well, the trends for 2022, those are probably coming out 2 or 3 years ago, right? In venture capital, you're looking like, hey, where are things going? So when we talk about the trends for 2022, we're really like, I'm asking you now, is like, where are we going down the road? What are you thinking as a venture capitalist involved in cybersecurity, data privacy, national security to an extent too? Where do you see things going the next couple of years, and what are the big ticket items that you're focusing on?
Well, that's interesting that you said it. I really think the growing trends are a result of that expanding attack surface that we've talked about that really has happened over the past few years. Those drivers include the proliferation of devices, the abundance of data, the movement to the cloud, the rise of remote work, and just digital transformation. So I'm happy to provide some trends and those key drivers. The increase in devices and users demand the need for identity access management solutions, or the increase in assets, both known and unknown, require vulnerability management solutions to really contextualize risk, or the accumulation of data. It's just really important to secure that data and understand who has access to that data. And as that data gets pushed to the cloud, it does become increasingly difficult to really discover and map that data, which is very important for GDPR and CCPA.
Right.
And given the movement to the cloud, it's really important to invest in cloud security solutions. I mentioned how security is early on, implemented early on in the development process. So we're looking at DevSecOps solutions. I mentioned supply chain and our investment in Teros. And then I think one more concept that I see has now materialized is zero trust, right? We talked about the movement to the cloud, the changing of the perimeter, the rise of remote work. We invested in a company called iBoss that provides zero trust network access, and they're really seeing some demand and interest. And those are just general trends, but that's really supported by the polls and the conversations that we're having. If you look at studies from CIOs, the main areas of that $150 billion market that's growing at 12% is identity and cloud and vulnerability management and endpoint.
Yeah, and well, I'm glad you brought up vulnerability management. We'll talk about that in a second. I'll bring that up. But I was going to talk about like the work from home, and I'm glad you laid that all out. And I think COVID really flipped that over, right? Because pre-COVID, it'd be like, oh, well, hybrid work, that's there. But now it's for everyone. And I honestly think, and just watching how things are playing out, just looking in the city of Boston, I would say people are in 2 to 3 days at best. And I don't think that's going to change. And I think there's been a study in the Wall Street Journal where they talked about 75% of the workforce will be hybrid. And this is, the white collar jobs. There's jobs out there that you need to come in. And then the other 25% will just be fully remote, all over.
I'm fully remote, right? So I told you that I do travel, but most of my colleagues we're around the US, right? We have a base in San Francisco, but we have a colleague in Washington, DC, another one in Tennessee, and and I'm based in the New York City area.
Right, and so it really comes down to your home office. You're the head of your security in many ways, and and I am too if I'm at home as well. But when you look at the technology, and I like how you mapped it out, it's like, okay, the perimeter just went out. It's no longer within, hey, I'm at Boston College, I'm within the perimeter, I step out, how do I secure? Now that perimeter is all over the globe. And I think that's where the technologies are going, and that's where the investments will be in the next couple of years, if not already there.
No, exactly. And it's really important to secure those communication channels. You mentioned Safeguard Cyber, or make sure that whoever's accessing applications or data that they are secure and that they're authenticated properly. And we invested in a company, cloud security company, as well, just talking about applications, called Anapsys that really secures, critical business applications, SAP, Oracle, and Salesforce to name a few.
Yeah, it was great. Someone just popped up and said, identity is the new perimeter. And that's something you listed number one as what you saw going forward as well.
Yeah, that traditional perimeter. But remember, if you look back on security, everyone's focused on the perimeter, but once you breach the perimeter and you're in there, how do you secure it? How do you identify? How do you detect and respond? So we're seeing that shift from the network more to identity towards the edge.
Yeah, and then you mentioned vulnerability management, and along those lines, you could have one vulnerability, but magnify that by 100 devices. Now you have 100. Now you magnify that across your whole company, which could be 15,000 just for one vulnerability. Can you talk a bit about any technologies that you might see now, or where do you see this going down the road?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And we talked about this before, but certain vulnerability scanners, they create a lot of noise and they probably don't prioritize the risks, and it's very difficult to address all those risks. We're very focused on the attack surface management space to really understand all those different threats. And recently, we're seeing a trend that there are a lot of technologies to address attack surface management, understanding your assets, externally facing ones, as well as understanding what happens when you're in the network. And we have looked at tech-led opportunities that really narrow that skill shortage gap where maybe a few analysts would need to understand an environment, or you would need to hire a pen tester to really to identify those vulnerabilities and those exploits. And what we're seeing is solutions that can be tech-led with a service to really prioritize those different risks.
Excellent. So, John, we've been going now for 40 minutes, so I'm not going to make you stay on much longer. But hey, I have we'll take some questions from the audience. They've been posting up there. But a fun one, I want to throw this out if you could share it. Have you seen any companies or CEOs coming to you with like what they think is like, hey, we have this great technology, this is fantastic, and it's completely just, they put in quotes, wild?
Yeah, all the time, right?
That's why I thought it was a great question.
We'll talk to as many companies as we can that are later stage that demonstrate commercial traction. We'll talk to earlier stage companies to develop relationships down the road. And if they say it's differentiated and wild and very impactful, we'd love to learn more. We do validate that, and we do talk to our different partners to determine if it truly is wild and interesting.
All right. So, we talked about if, like, hey, we were interested in getting involved with VCs, more so from the cybersecurity piece, like, hey, how do I become an advisor? How do I build my, company, and how do I get to your attention? How do I get involved in cybersecurity investing? What do I do there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really happens over time. If you're truly interested and passionate about cybersecurity investing, stay in the market, perform your research, and expand your network. I was lucky enough to be given an opportunity to help invest in one company, but I did surround myself with those founders and those practitioners and showed a genuine interest to really help develop my knowledge in the space. And that happens over time. And now I have experience, and it's something that I'm really interested in. So I would really say to expand that network and read a lot and focus on those trends and knock on those doors.
Yeah, in the industry you're in, it's really all about risk in many ways, right? You're looking at, you're going to invest in a company, you're going to do all this research, and you're trying to mitigate the risk as much as you can, then you're going to make that decision. And that's very similar to what the cybersecurity industry is all about, right? It's all about risk mitigation. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of work you put up front before you get to whether you're investing or acquiring. And then there's even more work at the back end.
yeah. And look, it happens over time. We touched briefly on the investment process, and I talked about investment themes and understanding risks and assessing those risks. We do have parameters that are important, whether it's a big market, it's a differentiated technology, it's a solid management team, and they have demonstrated commercial traction. And we try to validate that as much as possible by doing our own research and talking to as many people as possible. There are risks that are associated with that. There's risks that are associated with technology. We try to invest later stage where there is less technology risk. There is risk on the go-to-market side and growing and scaling a business. We are operators that have decades of experience on the go-to-market side, and we have deep channel relationships that can really help these next-gen technologies be adopted across the globe.
Yeah, and you tell me, but I think you have a cool job. Like just the whole idea of that you go target some cool company, some technology that really can help people, and help organizations and help the government. You go through all that due diligence, you figure out what's going on, then you go through the process, and then it doesn't end there. You get to see it through and see it mature and see how it helps and works. So you get to see like your baby grow and develop.
Yeah, and from my career, being in this field for nearly a decade, I was fortunate enough to start early stage in those late stage seed, the early stage B, those companies that are pre-revenue or they're 1 to 2 million of recurring revenue, where we could introduce them to maybe the first 10 CISOs, have referenceable customers, and then that company really does continue to evolve as they get 10 million of revenues, then to 20, to 50, to 100 million. And our team, they have grown companies from 100 million of revenue all the way up to $1 billion of revenue at FireEye.
Wow, that's amazing. With that, John, is there any questions I missed?
I think you got it. I'm pretty wiped.
Yes, you went longer than anticipated. That was awesome. And really, John, thank you for taking the time today, empowering through. I know how much really to us it means a ton. And true eagle, through and through, leading maroon and gold. And all the best. We're gonna have you back for sure. Probably at the DCCS live in June. We'll put you on a panel to go further on the trends. And with that, to everyone on board, our next webinar is going to be in February. We're looking to partner, and we are partnering with the International Association of Privacy Professionals. We're going to do a joint webinar with them focused on, and PwC as well, focused on data privacy and protection. Also, the Boston Conference on Cybersecurity with the FBI, we're moving that from March to June for obvious reasons due to COVID-19 concerns, but we're going to be back on campus. That's what we want to do. We want to have a live in-person one. We didn't want to go virtual this year. So we're moving it out and we're working out with the FBI, all the details, and you'll see more on LinkedIn and on our web pages. And finally, again, thanks so much, John, and everyone. Take care and go Eagles. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Go Eagles.
Take care.